These days, French cleats have become pretty popular among various YouTubers and really in the overall maker movement, but mostly in the context of cleat walls. This is a big thing online. Folks put rows of wood strips all over their walls, and they make all sorts of handy tool holders that may be hung and arranged however they like. They look great if you're into that type of thing, and they can be a pretty useful way of organizing tools. I know I'm much more likely to put away a tool if it has a place on a wall because I hate seeing that spot empty. And if someone borrows a tool and doesn't return it, I'm going to notice right away. But I don't use French cleats to hang tools, not because I think it's a bad idea, but because French cleat means something different for my generation than it does a lot of woodworkers who have grown up in the YouTube era where everyone has so many tools, they're putting them on the walls of their shops just to display them. To me, the French cleat isn't a modular tool organization system. It's a method of hanging cabinets and shelves and other large and heavy objects on the walls of your shop, home, or office. In fact, I really don't like to build wall cabinets without French cleats. In this video, I'll talk about some of the best uses for these ingenious little strips of wood and what you need to know to make them successfully, including some things that a lot of other videos and articles seem to miss. Let's begin with what makes the French cleat system work. Imagine you built a cabinet that has to be hung on a wall. Now, it can be challenging to hold a heavy cabinet in place while you level it and drive screws through the back rail and into the wall studs. A French cleat changes everything. It consists of two strips of wood with beveled edges. One attaches to a wall with the sharp edge pointing upward and sloping up and away from the wall. Let me tell you, it is far easier to level and screw down a simple strip of wood to a wall than it is a row of cabinets. The second strip attaches to the back of the cabinet, and the sharp edge points downward and slopes down and away from the cabinet. Now, hanging the cabinet is as easy as dropping one strip onto the other. The weight of the cabinet, combined with those interlocking bevels, will hold it in place, though sometimes it's a good idea to drive in some extra screws just to keep it from shifting over time. French cleats really pay off when you have several cabinets to hang in a row, because all of them can be attached to a single long cleat. So this allows you to kind of shift and move them around until you get them exactly where you want them before screwing them in place permanently. These office cabinets were all attached together into a single unit with the face frames all aligned ahead of time. Then it was hung on a French cleat as if it were a single cabinet. Imagine how difficult that would have been if they were all installed and aligned one at a time without the benefit of the French cleats. There are some things you have to consider though. For one thing, the cleat creates a gap between the cabinet and the wall. To keep the cabinet from tipping forward, you have to add a second non-beveled strip near the bottom. This is usually attached to the back of the cabinet, but you could attach your filler strip directly to the wall if you prefer. Another way to deal with this problem is to cut notches in the side panels when you build each cabinet, so you can mount them fully in contact with the wall. In this case, it made it possible to use the wall itself as the cabinet's back. Note how the notch is wider than the wall cleat, so there's room for the bevels to come together as the cabinet drops in place. The second issue concerns that same gap between the cabinet and the wall. It doesn't look great from the side. Even the cutout version isn't something you'd want to see in a nice kitchen. This is usually solved by adding a cover panel to the side of the last cabinet in the row, covering the gap. But it may also be dealt with during cabinet construction. If you have only one cabinet to hang, the cleat can be mounted flush with the back edges of the side panels. The mating cleat on the wall can be slightly less than the width of the cabinet, so it may fit in that same space between the two side panels and invisible from the outside. If you plan to hang multiple cabinets on a single cleat, you might just make the side panel of the last cabinet in the row 3/4 of an inch wider than the rest and let it cover the ends of the cleats. Another issue many people encounter when hanging cabinets, especially in an old house, is that the walls aren't usually flat. So in that case, you might have to shim behind your wall cleat to keep it reasonably straight. Yes, that can add some extra work, but you're going to be shimming behind each individual cabinet if you mount them one at a time. Now let's talk about the cleats themselves. I recommend 3/4 inch thick plywood. You can make cleats from solid wood, such as dimensional pine from the home center, but the grain orientation can weaken the sharp edges and one may split under a heavy load. So plywood eliminates that concern. The width is up to you. I like at least 3 inches so you have enough flat surface against the wall. Always screw them to studs. You never know how much weight this thing is going to hold sometime down the road. You can rip and then bevel all the strips individually, but you can save some cuts by making both beveled strips at once. Let's say I have a 6-inch wide board and I want to make 2 cleat strips from it, one for the cabinet and the other for the wall. I can tilt my blade to about 45 degrees and rip right down the middle. But finding that middle isn't as simple as just setting your fence to 3 inches. You have to account for some things. Here's a trick for ripping a bevel right down the center of any board. Take the width of the board, in this case 6 inches, subtract half its width and half its thickness. Half the width is 3 inches, half the thickness is 3/8. So I'll set my fence to 5 3/8 and I'll rip my board right down the center. Of course, that's not the exact center, but it'll be close enough for most uses. After all, your cleats don't have to match perfectly. But if you do want it in the exact center, so you have 2 perfectly matching beveled pieces, then also subtract half the thickness of your saw blade. Cleat walls are great. I may build one myself for a future video. But don't forget how French cleats may be useful for all sorts of other challenging situations. Now here's another useful solution. Ridge Carbide is the best kept secret in woodworking. I kid you not, their saw blades are second to none, both in quality and performance, and they're less expensive than the other ultra premium brands. Do yourself a favor, use the link and the discount code below this video. You will never go back to cheap blades again.